Hi, I'm Melissa with Prep Scholar, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about how the ACT goes out of its way to try to trick you using very deceptive answers during the ACT reading section. If you find this video useful, consider hitting the subscribe button down below so that you can get all of the latest updates from our channel sent directly to you. And even better, if you hit the notification button, the little bell icon, you're going to get notified with a little thing every time we upload a new video. Also, consider hopping down to the comment section and leaving us a note and everybody else a note about how you avoid getting tricked by questions like these on the ACT. So as I discussed in our last video, which you can find by clicking the card right up there, the ACT has a lot of methods of phrasing questions that can make them sound very similar to one another. I did a brief overview of that in the last video, but this time I'm going to go in depth into how these different kinds of answers are designed to trick you in different ways. So just to refresh, let's go back through those 4 different kinds of answers that may be tricky on the ACT reading section. The first one is going to be irrelevant answers. So an irrelevant answer is exactly what it sounds like. It's an answer that's not going to have anything to do with the question, and that might sound like it's going to be super easy to identify. So the thing is, they're not actually easy to identify, because if they just threw out answers that was totally irrelevant, then nobody would be fooled by it. Instead, what they do is put a seed of truth into it. So you'll see something that you can confirm as true, but that doesn't actually have anything to do with the question. So let's use a couple of very popular books as an example. So say that the passage was about Harry Potter, and you have a series of answers, and one of the answers says Katniss Everdeen volunteered as tribute in the Hunger Games. That would be an irrelevant answer because the question is about Harry Potter. It might be true, but it's irrelevant because it doesn't have anything to do with the question. That's the kind of way that they're going to trick you with irrelevant questions, is by giving you something true, but not making it have anything to do with the question itself. So opposite answers are another big way that they're going to try to trick you on the ACT reading test. Opposite answers, again, it might sound obvious if you're asked a question of like, what does it mean to go up? And one of the answers is, it means to get closer to the ground. You're going to know that that's not right. But the ACT is a lot trickier than that. What an opposite answer is going to do is it's going to take something, like especially wording, and kind of tie that into an answer that's actually the opposite of what you're looking for. The problem is that it uses this very similar language or little tricks like that to make you more likely to choose that answer. So an opposite answer might be one, returning to our Harry Potter example. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, what does Harry see when he first encounters a boggart? And you might have answers like, you know, a big spider, or Voldemort, or a Dementor, or a big slug, or something like that. And if we've read the passage, then we're going to know, if we've read it thoroughly, we're going to know that what he saw was a Dementor. But if we already know that boggarts are inspired by your greatest fear, we might be tempted to go with Voldemort. However, again, if we've read the passage, we're going to know that it's definitely not Voldemort, because that's an important plot point. So something like this relies on kind of our preconceived notions and on skimming, rather than what has actually occurred within the text. That's what an opposite answer is. It's going to lead you astray by giving you like a tempting little nugget of information that's designed to get you to pick it even though it's not correct. So the next major way that the ACT is going to try to trick you is with what's called a concept jumble. So a concept jumble is when you take 2 important ideas from the text, but you mix them together in a way that might sound like it could be true, but isn't actually true. So to return to the example of Harry Potter and the boggart, a concept jumble answer might say something like, Harry Potter saw a Dementor when he first encountered a boggart because he really hates chocolate, and the first time he saw a Dementor, he was given some chocolate afterward. That's a concept jumble because both of those things are true. He saw a boggart. He was given chocolate the first time he saw a Dementor. So we might conclude that therefore that has to be the correct answer. It's a jumble because those 2 things have absolutely nothing to do with one another. They're just 2 things that happened and then are smushed together in the answer to trick you. The way to avoid concept jumbles is to always read thoroughly. Read your question thoroughly, read the passage thoroughly, read the answers thoroughly. You want to do this just to make sure that you're not being tricked by 2 things that are true but that don't agree with one another. So the last way that the ACT reading section will try to trick you is with what's called plausible plausible interpretation. And this is exactly what it sounds like. So plausible interpretation is when you're offered an interpretation of the text that could be true. The problem is that it's merely plausible, which means that it lacks concrete evidence within the text itself. In order to spot this, you're going to have to be doing a little bit of interpreting as you're going. So once again, let's return to the example of Harry Potter and the Boggart. A question might ask us something like, when Harry first encounters a Boggart, it turns into a Dementor. Why does this happen? A plausible interpretation might suggest that it turns into a Dementor because Harry Potter has just encountered a Dementor for the first time, and he's very afraid of new creatures that he hasn't encountered before. That sounds reasonable. However, if we've read the whole passage and if we understand the context, it has nothing to do with the fact that they're like big scary corpse creatures wearing robes, and that's very frightening. And it has more to do with the fact that they inspire in him this feeling of fear and helplessness that's very troubling to Harry. So a concept jumble is something that's going to be an interpretation that makes sense, but that ultimately isn't supported in the text. So if you're struggling to choose between two answers, and one of them sounds like it could be true and maybe is a more literary answer or something like that, but you can't quite find evidence in the text, it's probably a plausible interpretation. You will always find concrete evidence in the text to support the correct answer. Next, we're going to go over an example problem from the ACT, which is one of the best ways to learn how to spot answers that are incorrect. So this is one that you can practice on. Down in the description box, you can actually find a whole bunch more practice questions, as well as a lot of blog posts at our Prep Scholar blog, which will walk you through different parts of the ACT and also give you a lot more studying strategies for the ACT reading section. So please do take some time to go through those and get familiar with all of these different strategies for passing your ACT, as well as visiting the previous video I did for this channel, which you can find by clicking the link up there. So this is a passage that you might find on the ACT. We're going to read through this passage, and then we're going to read through the question and answers, and then we're going to go through all of the answers and figure out which one is correct based on the process of elimination. So here's your passage. I nod or laugh on cue while I try to read, upside down, a story in the would-be journalist newspaper that has caught my eye. It is about the Russian space station and the cosmonaut who had been up in orbit during the takeover attempt and ultimate dissolution of the Soviet Union. After 16 long months, they are bringing the capsule back. While the train carries me back to my current home and away from my former, I keep thinking about that poor cosmonaut coming back to find his whole world changed, to find himself a man without a country, at least without the country he left behind. So our question is, when the narrator refers to the cosmonaut as a man without a country, she is most likely directly referring to the A. Cosmonaut's feeling that he is now a citizen of space, not the former Soviet Union, B. Cosmonaut's unrealized expectation that he will be treated like a hero, C. Political transformation that occurred while the cosmonaut was in space, D. 16 months that the cosmonaut spent in orbit around the Earth. So as you can see when you're looking at those answers, there's none of them that immediately stand out as being incorrect. They all have some degree of plausibility about them. So we're going to go step by step through them. The first answer, A, suggests that it is the amount of time that the cosmonaut has spent in space that makes him feel like a man without a country. From reading the passage, we know that this could be true. It sounds reasonable. We know that some major political transformation has happened within his country, even if we don't know the historical context. We can deduce that, quite possibly, the amount of time that he has spent in space is in some way affecting his feelings about his citizenship. However, nowhere in the text are we ever treated to the cosmonaut's feelings. We're only given them secondhand through the narrator. So because we can't find concrete evidence to support the idea that it is the amount of time that he spent in space making him feel like he's no longer a resident of the Soviet Union, this would actually be a plausible interpretation. We could, in theory, make the case that this is the point, but we don't have enough evidence to support it. So B suggests that the reason the cosmonaut no longer feels like a resident of his country is because he expected a hero's welcome and didn't get it. Once again, we don't have the cosmonaut's feelings in this passage. All we have is what we know on the part of the narrator. All we know is what the narrator is giving us. Because we don't have any evidence for what the cosmonaut is thinking and feeling, this answer is actually irrelevant. We don't have any evidence. We don't actually even need to know the cosmonaut's feelings in order to answer this question, so we can just go ahead and mark this one off. So C suggests that there's been a political transformation that occurred while the cosmonaut was in space, and that is the reason that he no longer feels like a resident of his home country. So we know from the passage that some kind of political transformation did take place, and we know from the narrator's perspective that the cosmonaut may no longer feel like a resident of his home country. So those are two important ideas that we can confirm right within the text itself, making C look like a really viable answer. So while we've crossed the other two off, we're going to go ahead and set C aside as a possible answer and return to that once we've looked at answer D. So answer D says that the narrator is likely referring to the fact that the cosmonaut has spent 16 months in space. And just like the previous answers, we can confirm that this is true. We know from reading the passage that the cosmonaut did indeed spend 16 months in space. The problem is that that has absolutely nothing to do with the question. If we had tied the concept of spending 16 months in space into, another extrapolation from that, we might have an answer. But in this case, if D is the answer, that basically means that the cosmonaut is a man without a country because he spent 16 months in space. And while we might derive all kinds of meaning from that, the two ideas themselves are not quite accurate. The fact that he spent 16 months in space is true, but we can't connect it to any idea on its own. We need a little more information than that. So once again, we're lacking concrete evidence within the text. In this case, this would be a concept jumble. It takes something we know to be true, that the astronaut spent 16 months in space, and tries to connect it to something that isn't there, which is that he no longer feels like a man with a country. So because we have to make these logical leaps ourselves, we know that that is the incorrect answer, which takes us back to answer C, where we found concrete evidence within the text, and it is a reasonable answer, so we can conclude that C is the correct answer. So as you can see, these questions on the ACT reading section can be super tricky, and that's what they're designed for. They're designed to give you all of this information, which is competing for your attention, and a lot of it sounds super plausible, so you end up getting confused and picking the wrong answer just by virtue of it sounding like it could be right. That's why you need to memorize these different kinds of incorrect answers so that you're better able to identify them on the test. You can cross out the ones that aren't correct and then answer the question correctly. This is also good for helping you guess, because the more incorrect answers you can eliminate, the better chance you have of guessing correctly. And on a test like the ACT, where you have a serious time crunch, having a better chance at guessing can mean the difference between a good score and a great one. So down in the description box, we have a whole bunch more Prep Scholar blog posts that'll help you understand more about how the ACT works and help you get a better score. You can also refer back to my last video, which has all kinds of studying tips and little tips and tricks you should know about the ACT. We also offer a tutoring program, which is actually scaled to your exact needs rather than trying to be some kind of broad approach where everybody gets taught the exact same things. The ACT prep program is actually geared toward helping you work on the skills that you actually need, not that some random person somewhere else actually needs. The tutoring program is totally done on your time, on your schedule, to your needs, and we also have all of those blog posts to help you out. So please do take some time to look through the description section and find some blog posts to help you get a better score. If you found this video useful, please consider subscribing to Prep Scholar TV and hitting the little bell icon to get notified every time we upload a new video so that you get it delivered directly to you rather than having to search around and hope that you find it. Thanks again for joining me for this journey through all of the ACT's tricky reading questions, and I look forward to hearing from you all. Have a great day and happy prepping!